So chapter 32. And I'm going to ask my faithful manuensis over here to do most of the reading this morning.
Okay.
Do you mind?
No, no.
My voice has started to give me fits, so I don't want to overdo it. And then wind up hacking my way at the end. So we're in chapter 32, and let's start with just reading verses 1 through 5.
Oh, that's easy. Now the Reubenites and the Gadites possessed a very large number of cattle. When they saw that the lands of Jazer and Gilead were ideal for cattle, the Gadites and the Reubenites came and addressed Moses, Eleazar the priest, and the leaders of the community. They said, Adarach, Dibon, Jazer, Nimrah, Heshbon, Elealeth, Sebam, Nebo, and Beon, the lands that the Lord subdued before the community of Israel, is ideal for cattle, and your servants have cattle. So they said, if we have found favor in your sight, let this land be given to your servants for our inheritance. Do not have us cross the Jordan River.
Okay, well, first of all, that was an amazing job on getting all those names with no prior notice from me. So, thank you. Thing you notice, why did they say they wanted to stay on the east side of Jordan?
Because the land was good. Yeah, land was good for cattle.
Cattle. So these two tribes, particularly, it seems, raised cattle. Well, now we know there's cattle all throughout the 12 tribes, but apparently these two tribes just had a large number of cattle. What's the difference? We think when we think cattle, sheep, we think they eat the same thing, right?
No.
Well, they don't. They will eat the same thing. If you put sheep on grassland, they will happily eat grass all day long. If you put cattle in a clover field, they will happily eat clover all day long. However, if you put them in areas where things are mixed, where there's some grass and there's some clover and there's some other stuff, what you will find is that the sheep tend towards the clover and the cattle tend towards the grass. They have preferred diets. They can eat other things, and they will, but the thing they want, the thing that's their preferred diet, cattle lean more towards grass, and sheep lean more towards broadleaf, non-grass, low-growing plants.
And goats eat anything.
And goats are much less picky, and goats in particular. Sheep tend this way, but goats are even worse at not just clipping things off at ground level, but goats will pull them up and eat them. So they tend to get the roots too.
Cattlemen don't like sheep herders either because the sheep got teeth kind of like that. So they graze really low and cows can't graze behind them.
Yes, if there is only grass. Mm-hmm. But if you give them mixed grazing, then the sheep will as long as there's plenty of other stuff, that's their preferred diet. So it's interesting how we, you learn how animals eat. They've got cattle. They say, hey, this is grassland. This will be great for the cattle. And we have a lot of cattle. It's not that they don't have sheep, it's that these two tribes seem to have focused on cattle. So we got a lot of cattle, there's a lot of grassland, why don't we just stay here? So what we need to think back just a chapter or two and realize that what has happened is God has completely dispossessed and to a large extent destroyed the inhabitants of this real estate. So essentially you have a bunch of empty real estate. And Midian, at least, they even burned down the cities. I mean, cities are gone. Now, what we're going to see is they could rebuild some of them, but they completely depopulated the land. So if the Israelites don't populate this land, what's going to happen? Somebody else will. So it doesn't just make good sense if you're grazing cattle. It makes good logistical sense that we've got all of this real estate. We need to put our people on it so other people who might not like us so well don't come in. Okay, so there you go. And now read through verse 15, 6 through 15.
Moses said to the Gadites and the Reubenites, "Must your brothers go to war while you remain here? Why do you frustrate the intent of the Israelites to cross over into the land which the Lord has given them? Your fathers did the same thing when I sent them from Kadesh Barnea to see the land. When they went up to the Eshcol Valley and saw the land, they frustrated the intent of the Israelites so that they did not enter the land that the Lord had given them. So the anger of the Lord was kindled that day, and he swore, because they have not followed me wholeheartedly, not one of the men 20 years old and upward who came from Egypt will see the land that I swore to give to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, except Caleb, son of Jephunneh, the Kenizzite, and Joshua, son of Nun, for they followed the Lord wholeheartedly. So the Lord's anger was rekindled against the Israelites, and he made them wander in the wilderness for 40 years until all that generation that had done wickedly before the Lord was finished. Now look, you are standing in your father's place, a brood of sinners, to increase still further the fierce wrath of the Lord against the Israelites. For if you turn away from following him, he will once again abandon them in the wilderness, and you will be the reason for their destruction."
So, I realize you guys are young and you don't remember, but about the time many of you were born, we had a little bit of a problem. You see, God told us to go in and occupy the land, and your parents said, "I don't think so." And that's why we've been wandering around here for the last 40 years while you've grown up and many of you were born. So just so you understand, your fathers said they didn't want to cross into the land too, and look what happened. Maybe, just maybe, you want to reconsider. Well, but Moses, this is different. We promise you this is different. And here's how we're going to show you this is different.
Then they came very close to him and said, "We will build sheepfolds here for our flocks and cities for our families. But we will maintain ourselves in armed readiness and go before the Israelites until whenever we have brought them to their place. Our descendants will be living in fortified towns as a protection against the inhabitants of the land. We will not return to our homes until every Israelite has his inheritance, for we will not accept any inheritance on the other side of the Jordan River and beyond, because our inheritance has come to us on this eastern side of the Jordan." Then Moses replied, "If you will do this thing, and if you will arm yourselves for battle before the Lord, and if all your armed men cross the Jordan before the Lord until he drives out his enemies from his presence, and the land is subdued before the Lord, then afterward you may return and be free of your obligation to the Lord and to Israel. This land will then be your possession in the Lord's sight."
Go ahead. Stop there for a minute.
Okay.
Okay, so you get the difference. No, Moses, we're not saying we don't want to go occupy the land. We're saying we believe God's given us an inheritance here. This is land that he told us to drive out and destroy the inhabitants. And he's told us that was because of their sin that they were driven out. And it's perfect for our cattle. And we're not saying we're not going to fight. We're just saying this is a perfect place for us to set up our settlements. So we're not saying no. We're not saying we don't want to go into the land. We're not even saying we're not going to fight with you. As a matter of fact, they're saying, we'll lead the army. We're now try and get this little bit of a mindset. They have just watched God drive out nations before them. Okay? Did you notice that it's the land the Lord conquered? It wasn't the land they conquered. And they got that. And they said, God's done this. We can lead the army over there, and that's not a big deal. They've just come through a battle where not one Israelite died, and they were facing an army 10 times their size. When God said, you know, you got 600,000 men under arms, I just want you to take 10,000. 12,000. 1,000 for each tribe. That's it. Can't take any more. Because if you take a really big army, you might think you're special. So they recognized that God drove out the inhabitants, that God gave them the land. And it's like, well, God says we're supposed to go across the Jordan and take that land. No problem. We're in the front of the army. We can do that. Only let us have our settlement here because we believe God's given us this. Do you see how faith works? It's not we talk about blind faith. Faith isn't blind. Faith isn't stupid. They look around them. They know God has promised all that land across the Jordan to all the nations of Israel, or all the tribes of Israel. And so they know they can go over there and claim their inheritance. But they look at this and they say, cattle, grassland, no people. Maybe we ought to stay here. We believe that God wants us to stay here. So faith has a brain. They trust God to deliver the land over there, but God's already delivered the land over here that's perfectly suited to their particular style of husbandry, cattle. So they say, well, doesn't God want us to stay here? So they take the idea to Moses. They're not being rebellious here. They're not saying, we're going to stay here. It doesn't matter what God says. They take the idea to the spiritual leader and they say, we think God wants us to do this. What do you think? Go ahead.
But if you do not do this, then look, you will have sinned against the Lord, and know that your sin will find you out. So build cities for your descendants and pens for your sheep, but do what you have said you would do. So the Gadites and the Reubenites replied to Moses, your servants will do as my Lord commands. Our children, our wives, our flocks, and all our livestock will be there in the cities of Gilead. But your servants will cross over, every man armed for war, to do battle in the Lord's presence, just as my Lord says. So Moses gave orders about them to Eleazar the priest, to Joshua son of Nun, and to the heads of the families of the Israelite tribes. Moses said to them, if the Gadites and the Reubenites cross the Jordan with you, each one equipped for battle in the Lord's presence, and you conquer the land, then you must allot them the territory of Gilead as their possession. But if they do not cross over with you armed, they must receive possessions among you in Canaan. Then the Gadites and the Reubenites answered, your servants will do what the Lord has spoken. We will cross armed in the Lord's presence into the land of Canaan, and then the possession of our inheritance that we inherit will be ours on this side of the Jordan River. So Moses gave to the Gadites, the Reubenites, and to half the tribe of Manasseh, son of Joseph, the realm of King Sihon of the Amorites, and the realm of King Og of Bashan, the entire land with its cities and territory surrounding them. The Gadites rebuilt Dibon, Ataroth, Shopian, Jazer, Jogbaha, Beth Nimrah, and Beth Haran as fortified cities and constructed pens for their flocks. The Reubenites rebuilt Heshbon, Elealeth, Kiriathaim, Nebo, Baal-meon, with a change of name, and Sibmah. They renamed the cities they built. The descendants of Machir, son of Manasseh, went to Gilead, took it, and dispossessed the Amorites who were in it. So Moses gave Gilead to Machir, son of Manasseh, and he lived there. Now Jair, son of Manasseh, went and captured their small towns and named them Hoboth Jair. Then Nobath went and captured Kenath and its villages and called it Nobath after his own name.
Did you notice the addition there? Did you catch it? What was the addition?
They put their last name on it.
No.
Oh, they
no.
added Manasseh's son.
Very good. Got it. They added, and this is key, half of the tribe of Manasseh. Now remember, Joseph got a double inheritance. His two sons both became full tribes. So he gets kind of a double whammy. So Ephraim and Manasseh, his two sons, each get an inheritance as a whole tribe. However, Manasseh, it turns out, is really big. So here is the division of the land after the conquest. And what I want you to see here is Reuben, Gad, Manasseh on the east side of Jordan, but that's only half of the tribe of Manasseh. So the other half of the tribe of Manasseh gets an allotment on the west side of the Jordan. Okay? And yes, if you want to know how the country of Jordan got its name, during the British Mandate, it was called Transjordan. That is, across the Jordan. So, yes, modern nation of Jordan right there. And here we see the distribution of the 12 tribes. You notice Levi does not have an inheritance among the tribes. Their inheritance is the tabernacle.
Well, Benjamin got.
Say what?
Benjamin doesn't have much there.
Yeah. Okay, now, so who's a Benjamite that you think of? Oh, come on. Everybody's going to think of a Benjamite right off the top of your head. At least two.
What did you ask? What did you ask?
Name a couple of people from the tribe of Benjamin. Itty bitty tribe.
Peter?
No.
Paul?
No. Yes. Paul is one. King Saul is another one. So a little bitty tribe, but not without some influence. And I know these are hard to read back there. Actually, a little hard to read up here.
Okay, where is Dan? Where is
It's okay, we can figure it.
What?
Dan?
Dan. Dan
Dan is
yeah,
dark
I see
green.
the green.
Dark green.
right here.
Yeah.
Okay? So, a couple of interesting things about this. Obviously, Judah's pretty large, but Simeon is completely surrounded by Judah. And then there's Benjamin right on the north border of Judah. Small inheritance, small tribe. And then Dan, Ephraim, half of Manasseh, Issachar, Zebulun, Asher, Naphtali. Not Naphtali Legumis, by the way. Another guy altogether. So what we need to see here, obviously, is that Reuben, Gad, and half of Manasseh make their settlements on the east side of Jordan. Now, did you notice it said they were making pens for their sheep? They have mostly cattle. They have maybe a greater proportion of cattle than most of the people. Doesn't mean they don't have any sheep. Interesting thing about cattle and sheep and grazing. Cattle tend to stay together in nice, neat herds. Sheep are kind of a herd animal, but they kind of wander off.
All we like sheep have gone astray.
Each one to his own way.
We like sheep.
And so if you want to keep your sheep, you kind of take them out, let them graze, bring them in, pin them up, because they will wander off. And while it's now in the West, we figured out how to brand cattle, so we just let them all go out there, and then come roundup time, we just bring in the ones that have our brand on them. Try to brand a sheep. Stinky wool.
Have you ever seen what?
Mutton busting at rodeos.
Oh.
Kids trying
Yes.
to get a hold of
Yes.
sheep. Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, so the head sheep that was not their primary thing. Their big thing was cattle. So they had to build pens for their sheep, but they have the grassland for their cattle. Make sense? So we have the two animals. We treat them differently. Okay. So here's the thing, and this is probably where I'm guessing at least half of you are thinking, and the nation was divided, and there were 10 tribes that became Israel, and then there was Judah in the south, and then the 10 tribes got taken away by Assyria, and they were lost. Oh, come on! Surely somebody thought about that. 10 lost tribes of Israel.
No, Ray
There's
isn't
whole
here.
movies about it.
Ray isn't here. Ray isn't here.
Yeah, if Ray was still alive, Ray would definitely tell us about the 10 lost tribes of Israel.
That's Ray Griffin.
And how they wound up in Scotland. Which, by the way, is only one of many different theories about where the 10 lost tribes went. Theories range from China to South Africa, the American Indians. Mormons believe that American Indians are descended from the 10 lost tribes of Israel.
And they can prove it. And they can prove it.
No.
That was the question.
Not a shred of proof, actually. Interestingly, if you read the Book of Mormon, the Israelites who've transplanted themselves from the Middle East to the North American continent, by way of submarines, by the way. I'm just telling you what the book says. Had chariots and horses and breastplates and armor and all kinds of things. And the absence of archaeological evidence of a wheel or complex metalwork in harder metals like steel and iron that would be, or brass that would be needed for breastplates or armor. No wheels, no chariots. Oh, and by the way, they had no horses. So.
Okay, you've raised something in my mind that started turning. You brought up the Northern Kingdom and the Southern Kingdom, which is coming up. And the Southern Kingdom had only Judah and Benjamin. What happened to Simeon?
Well, the assumption is that Simeon essentially gets absorbed by Judah because obviously it's surrounded. Okay? So when people talk about the 10 lost tribes, of course, they say Benjamin and Judah are the two that remained because Benjamin is clearly absorbed into Judah. And now, when I say absorbed, that doesn't mean they lose their identity. It just means they're within that political sphere. Okay? Because the Apostle Paul says, a Jew of the Jews, a Pharisee of the tribe of Benjamin. He knew where he was from. Okay? So we know that. The thing is, what happened to the other tribes? And the answer is, they're still there. Well, not there, but they're still among us. And they were never lost.
I remember reading that it was a policy of invaders at the time, like the Syrians, when they took over a land area, they would move the people and they would separate them.
Right.
So they couldn't take all the Jews in one block because those Jews might go to war against them, and try to revolt. So instead, they would take them and move them to different places so that they were isolated from one another.
That is absolutely correct. That is exactly what Tiglath-Pileser, the king of Syria, did. The third, Tiglath-Pileser the third. was a very popular name.
Kind of like mine.
You mean there's going to be a Friedel the Third?
Yeah, I don't know it.
Okay, but you're right. When nations conquered other nations, what they wanted to do is to disperse them. There were several reasons for this. One, gods were thought to be gods of places. So I remove you from your God. I remove you from your source of power. Okay, so there's the spiritual reason. The political reason is much more practical and down to earth. What you want to do is you want to take the political leaders, the princes and the nobles and all of these, and you want to get them out of there. And you send them all different places because you send them in small enough groups that they don't have any influence where you send them.
Well, they killed them a lot of times.
Well, but you don't want to depopulate an area. But if I conquer this place over here and this place over here, I take the noblemen from here and move them over here, and the noblemen from here move them over here. And now they're amongst a population that does not give them any influence. So they lose their political influence, and now I, the king up in the big palace, I have political influence. So there's all of that dynamic going on here. But I wanted to address this here when we started talking about the 12 tribes, because this will come up again and again and again and again. You will see references to it everywhere, all the time. People talk about it. It doesn't make any sense. And here's why it doesn't make any sense. 2 Chronicles chapter 30, King Hezekiah, after the northern kingdoms are taken into captivity and dispersed. Okay. After that, Hezekiah sent word to all Israel and Judah. This is 2 Chronicles chapter 30, verse 1. All Israel and Judah, and also wrote letters to Ephraim and Manasseh. So we have a specific reference to all Israel, which would imply all 12 tribes, and specific references to Ephraim and Manasseh. In verse 11, he sends out this letter saying, let's come and have a Passover in Jerusalem. He's a king of Judah. He's sending a letter to what once was the United Kingdom. And he's sending a letter to these other tribes saying, hey, let's come to Jerusalem and have a Passover together. So verse 11 says, nevertheless, some from Asher, Manasseh, and Zebulun humbled themselves and went to Jerusalem. So after the Assyrian dispersion, when everybody says, oh, those tribes are gone and they become Israel, or they become Chinese, or they become Africans, or whatever, the theories are endless. But everybody just takes that and they don't read the rest of the book. You read the rest of the book and you find, okay, so let's take a look at how many tribes we have here. We have Asher, Manasseh, Zebulun, Judah, Benjamin, Simeon, and Levi. That's 7 of 12 tribes right there. So there are no 10 lost tribes. Right here in this passage we have 7 of 12 named. The others aren't named because they didn't come. This is the names of the tribes who came. But the context makes it clear that there were people there from those tribes. Hezekiah sent word to all Israel. Okay, so there are no 10 lost tribes. It's not in the Bible. People who talk about it are completely off base. In there, God knows exactly where they are. He always has. And they are not Scottish or Chinese.
Or Danish.
Or Danish, yeah. Okay, so, and just for grins, let's go to the New Testament. Luke chapter 2, verse 36. You don't have to turn there. There was a prophet named Anna, the daughter of Penuel, of the tribe of Asher. In the New Testament, we have Asher, Benjamin, Judah, and Levi. Well, that's 4. That means at most you could have 8. But this whole idea of 10 lost tribes, just not in the Bible. When you get to the day of Pentecost, you find that they're gathered in the nation, in the city of Jerusalem, Jews from every tribe.
Okay.
So they may have been living all over, but they knew what tribe they were from.
Approximately what year is it?
Is this? I was not anticipating that question. This is going to be somewhere around 1400 BC. Around there. That's just pulling them. It's going to be, I'm going to be within a few hundred years.
Okay.
About that. Yeah, I was not anticipating that question. I'm sorry.
I stumped the teacher. I have a question too.
Okay, go for it.
Okay, when Joseph blessed, when Jacob blessed Joseph's children,
From
and
Manasseh.
the hand thing, and he said that that Ephraim would be greater than Manasseh. Now, what's with this? Ephraim is here and Manasseh is here. What happened?
Yeah, Manasseh looks bigger than.
I don't know. But greatness is not real estate.
Well,
necessarily.
I know, but what I'm asking is, what happened with Ephraim that made him greater than Manasseh?
I don't know.
Oh. He likes those.
Thank you.
That means you're going to research it, I'm sure.
Yes, yes, it does.
That means you're going to research it.
Oh, yeah.
Well, good, because tell me when you find it out.
I will.
Because I haven't found it out either, and I'm not as good at research as you are.
Well, now I've got to go find out. I love it when people do that. Thank you very much. That's fun. Okay, so questions? Anything? Yes.
No,
5 minutes. Oh, okay. That was not. I have a question that you have 5 minutes. Actually, mine says I've got about a minute. You're getting me out here at 10 till, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I've been trying to wrap up right at 9:45 so that I can get out of here by 10 till. Questions? You see what God has done. He has allowed. He's made an allowance for people to think. He didn't say to them, do you think God didn't know this was going to happen? Of course he did. But he's brought these people in. He said, now I want you to wipe out the inhabitants. And he just waits. Because he knows what they're going to do. But he wants us to think. He knows the end from the beginning. But he doesn't tell us everything. He gives us a set of principles to live within. And then says, now I gave you a brain. Use it. Go think. I promise I'll direct your path. I'll take you where you need to go. I'll be with you when you get there. But think. Use that brain I gave you. Yes.
Okay. We know that the promised land was all the way over the Euphrates River and all that kind of stuff, way east.
The entire Abrahamic land grant.
That's not the promised land?
Yes, that is the promised land.
Okay.
But there are different ways of defining what the promised land is. And in this, remember, and this is where we kind of get messed up, is that, remember, all of this land was already settled by descendants of Abraham. Ishmael, Moab, Lot. Moab was the descendants of Lot. So the descendants of Ishmael and Lot are already here.
And that's the beginning of the fighting between Israelites and the Muslims, or what has become the Muslims.
The Ishmaelites.
Yeah.
Okay? So
And it was promised.
So God promises all of that land to the descendants of Abraham, not necessarily to the descendants of Israel.
Okay. Got it.
Although, at one point, he tells, and I'd have to look this one up too, he tells Jacob, what I promised to Abraham and Isaac, I'm promising now to you. So we can assume that, although it was not specific in the land grant at the time of the Exodus, that it applies to all the descendants of Abraham and Israel today. That someday they will have all that land. Yes.
Well, and he specifically says over more than once that it will come through Isaac. You know, when there was the difference between Ishmael and Isaac.
The birthright travels Abraham, Isaac, Israel. Yes. 1 minute. Okay. So now it's time, really time to quit. This is one of those where you don't have a kind of a punchline that says, "Go thou and do likewise." You know, it's like what I want you to see is God is at work. He is working in the midst of all the stuff that's going on in our lives, and He expects us to think. And when we think, He expects us to bring it to Him and let Him show us what we need to do. And it will be more than just sit where we are. It will be, here's your blessing, now go and get to work. Yes, you can have this blessing, cross Jordan and fight. So we want to live in that attitude of dwelling in the blessing and going into the fight. We use our brains. We see what God has put in front of us. We think things through. And when we do, we bring that to God and say, what do you think?